Hi, Ludwika. Hi, John and Minal, Natasha and Nordia. Hi, Stephen and John and Amanda and Amber. Hi, Rachel and Rowan, Sarania and Vega. Hi, Cyrus. Hi, Rachel and Nana. Hi, Sahib, and hi, Shanda. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Renu. Hi, Maureen. Hi, Joshua and Lawrence and Jody and Benita and Antonio and Annalisa. So nice to see some familiar and some new faces. Welcome to each and every one of you to the OUM Admissions Information Webinar. I'm Associate Professor Nicolette McGuire. I'm our Associate Dean for Student Engagement, and I'll give you a bit of an overview on our webinar today, and we'll get started. So today we're going to cover a bit of introductions and an overview of the university. Our admissions staff will talk about our admissions requirements, the process, and admissions interviews. We'll chat a little bit about the curriculum. You'll hear from some of our student ambassadors, and then we'll do a Q&A and some next steps. You'll notice that we have a Q&A box enabled in this webinar. So as questions come to your mind, go ahead and type any questions or comments that you have in our Q&A box, and we'll answer them live or within the Q&A. So we're here to answer your questions and to get to the bottom of your queries. So please don't be shy with those questions. We'll answer them throughout the session, and we'll also have that Q&A period at the end. So let's start off with some introductions and an overview of the university. So first I'm going to let Angelo introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. Great to see all of you here. I'm recognizing some of the names already. I am the lead admissions counselor for OUM. I primarily work with students from North America. So if you're in Canada or the US, hopefully you've talked to me or at least communicated with me before. I've been with OUM for almost 11, 12 years, I believe. So great to see everyone here, and happy to answer any questions as we go through our session here today.
Thanks, Angelo. Fiba, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Fiba. I'm in the third year of my studies, and I live in Australia, Sydney. And I'm one of the student ambassador, and this is my second year as a student ambassador, and I'm looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiba. Grace, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Grace Bieber. I'm the Director of Marketing, Communications, and Admissions, and I work university-wide. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Grace. Norman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Norman, and like Fiba, this is my second year as the student ambassador. I am currently in the process of finishing my second year. Looking forward to my clinicals and looking forward to meeting you guys.
Thanks, Norman. And Shanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name's Shanda. I'm an admissions counsellor at OUM. I probably looked at some of your applications already, and I will look at them in the future. I am located in Brisbane, Australia. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Shanda. If any attendees want to introduce themselves, you can go ahead in the Q&A box and just type your name and location, and we can give you a shout out and a welcome to you. So in terms of our OUM overview, it's hard to just put OUM into a few statements at the beginning of a webinar, but I'll give it a try. So OUM is a really vibrant and collaborative community. I think the collaboration within OUM is what really sets us apart. I mean, in addition to our virtual and live hybrid model and the unmatched clinical experiences that you can have in Samoa, our collaboration is really a big part of our university. So OUM has 334 students, and they're the beating heart of our university. And they're supported by 53 preclinical and clinical faculty and advisors, and 50 staff and administrators as well. So our community includes students from health and non-health backgrounds, from careers that have been well established, or individuals that are just out of medical school, individuals with science backgrounds, technology backgrounds, education, law, English, all kinds of different backgrounds. We also have students that come from over 55 birth countries, but now call either Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Canada, or the United States home. So one of the things that all of our students have in common is that none of them have been able to get rid of that inner voice that keeps reminding them of their dream to become a doctor. And maybe you have something in common with our students too, that maybe you've had a very long-standing dream. Maybe it's a dream you've had since you were really little and you first encountered a clinician. Maybe it's a dream that has occurred to you later on in life, but it's a dream that you have that you just can't get rid of, you just can't shake. And it's really important to have that dream and that motivation towards becoming a physician, because it's a really difficult journey being a medical student. I think all of you know that at the outset, otherwise you wouldn't have made it this far. So we really want to welcome you on your medical student journey and commend you for joining our community and getting a better sense of what we're about today. So I'm going to turn it over to our admissions team to talk a little bit about the admissions requirements. So Angelo, if you would take the microphone, please.
Actually, I'm going to let Shanda take this first slide here.
Even better, Shanda.
So thank you, Dr. Maguire and Angelo, and welcome everyone again. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to be talking about the minimum entry requirements considered for entry into OUM. So firstly, you need to have completed at least a bachelor's degree with a GPA of 3 on the 4-point scale or 5.5 on the 7-point scale or its equivalent. If your institution has used a different grading system, you can contact your admissions counsellor, or if you don't have a counsellor yet, the admissions office, and we'll just need to see your transcripts and the grading system that your institution has used, and we can calculate that GPA for you. Having good grades in science classes or subjects may also help your application, but it isn't a requirement. We do require English language proficiency. So if English is your second language, but you have studied at an English speaking institution, you should meet those requirements. But again, if you're unsure, you can contact your admissions counsellor and they can advise you if you meet the requirements or if you need to sit an IELTS or TOEFL. At OUM, we don't require GAMSAT or MCAT scores for entry. And finally, it's important to note that we only accept prospective applicants who are residents of the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Samoa. So if you aren't a resident of those countries at the moment, we wouldn't be able to accept your application at this time. And now I'll pass it over to Angelo.
Great. Thank you, Shanda. I think we're ready for the next slide. So I'm going to just talk a few minutes about the admissions process, the interviews. Again, looking at the guest list here, I can tell quite a few of you are probably in this process as we speak. So you can kind of get a sneak peek of what's coming up in the coming months. But to be fair, I think when we're talking about application, I think really it all starts before that time. I would hope that when people are looking at our university, get really all your questions answered before you formally apply. That would be my suggestion. There's a lot to learn. It's a unique program. We bring in unique students, non-traditional medical students. So get your questions answered. From the moment you really reach out to the admissions team, whether it's email or a phone call, you're normally assigned to a counselor. We have multiple counselors, so someone will get back to you. If you're not sure, you can always reach out to the admissions email, which is admissions@oum.edu.ws. Any questions you have, probably some of the most important things you probably want to really learn about beforehand is understanding the workload of what it takes to be a successful student at OUM, and also the financial commitment. I think those are some of the just two. There are many things you should probably ask, but two of the key items that you want to learn about as you're preparing and making sure this is the right place for you before you formally apply. If you've gone through that process and you've, you decided that, yes, this is the best place for your future, then the next step would be that formal application. There is an application portal that we use where you can kind of create the online account, get that initial process started. Luckily for us, most of the information can be submitted through the online portal. You have information that you fill out on the online application, and then you send us your certified or official transcripts. We do need 3 recommendation letters. At least one of those letters needs to be from a physician or a medical doctor, depending on what side of the globe you're located. The title may change, but someone, 3 people who can recommend you for medical school. You upload your essay and CV into the online application. And for the recommendation letters, I'll just point out, it's actually a very straightforward process. All you need to do is just give us the reference information on the application, and we'll reach out to them to request a recommendation letter on your behalf. Once that is all set, there is a point when the applications close, which we'll talk more about the deadlines in a few slides from now. But we'll start reviewing all the candidates. A portion of the applicants who have submitted their application will go through what we call the interview process. Unfortunately, not everyone will, but we do send out interviews to the highly qualified applicants. You'll have 2 interviews with different members of our admissions team. One will be a screening interview to kind of gauge your background and your readiness to be an OUM student. The second interview is with the admissions panel, who are all faculty members at the university. So 2 interviews, both done on Zoom. No need to go anywhere in person. And the best part is you don't have to wait till everyone's interviewed to see who's in and who's out. You get that second interview at the panel normally within 24 hours. We'll relieve you of all that stress, let you know if you're in or out, if you're accepted or not. And if you're accepted, your admissions team will walk you through the entire post-acceptance process and get you ready for enrollment. That's basically it. Just kind of give everyone a kind of a brief overview. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can feel free to put it in the chat box. We'll try to get to all of them before the end of today's session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angelo and Shanda. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. So for the benefit of those who don't have access to the Q&A or who are attending via recording. So the first one is from Anon. How do we get an admissions counselor?
Okay, so if you've been in contact with us, either, as I mentioned, via any form, call, email, or you signed up on one of our forms, you probably were assigned to a counselor. It's possible maybe that initial email went to your spam. Just contact us again. Someone from our team will reach out to you and help you with all your questions. So again, that's going to be admissions@oum.edu.ws. And someone, I promise you, will get back to you within a short time. We have counselors almost in every time zone across the globe.
Thanks, Angelo. Second one from Anon. Is there a template or list of things that need to be included in the recommendation letters?
That's a great question. So, I think hopefully the people you put on as a reference know you well enough to recommend you for medical school. I think that's an important part of it. This cannot just be a general, yeah, he or she is a great guy or a great woman. This needs to specifically state why they're recommending you for medical school. If it could say Oceania University of Medicine, that's even better. So if you're working on this, you may want to give your references a heads up. We'll need that information. We need them to sign and date the letters and then put it preferably on letterhead. Keep in mind though, when you put their information in on the online application, we will email them and let them know this information, instructions on what we need on those letters, and we'll give them a link to upload their letters directly to the application. So we'll give them this information, but if you want to go ahead and just give them a heads up as well, I think that's certainly a great idea. I mean, I hope you give them a heads up anyway to let them know you've put them down as a reference.
Thanks, Angelo. Shanda, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Angelo has it all covered.
Okay, thanks. And there's another question as well in the Q&A. Can you apply and postpone your start date if needed?
So all accepted students to OUM have an option to defer their acceptance once and only to the next available intake. So I would say yes to that question. I would say you wouldn't want to just kind of just use that up, too early, just in case, you do get accepted and you really do need that extra time to start. But yes, all accepted students do have that option to defer their acceptance once and only to the next available intake.
Thanks. Another question has just come in. Oh no, that was the one we just answered. No problems. If you have any
Awesome.
further questions about the admissions process and interviews throughout the session, please go ahead and continue to type those in the Q&A and we will get to them. Thanks, Shanda and Angelo. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the OUM curriculum. It has 3 phases: the preclinical phase, which you'll start with, then the transition phase, which is the transition between the preclinical and clinical phase, and then finally the clinical phase. And because you went out of your way to come to the webinar and to learn a little bit more information about the curriculum and about the admissions process, I thought I would give you the inside information that you won't get from the website. But I thought if you haven't had a chance to look at the website and the set of curricula that we run, that we can go through that and I can kind of give you the inside information. So if you're not familiar with the curriculum areas, you can go onto the website and it'll tell you about the standard pathway and the USMLE pathway. So the standard pathway is for students who do not live in the United States and do not plan on rotating or practicing in the United States. And the USMLE pathway stands for United States Medical Licensure Exam pathway. And that is for students who live in the United States or plan to rotate or practice in the US. So I'll show you both of those curricula and give you the inside information. So as I said, there are 3 different steps: the preclinical, the transition, and the clinical phase. So the preclinical phase, my favorite phase, I'm a faculty member in the preclinical area. It includes a set of courses. So every student starts with the general principles unit, which is exactly what it sounds like. It gives you a general basis and basic understanding of the medical sciences. So you learn things about genetics and microbiology and anatomy and physiology that will help you as you go through the organ system. So after the completion of the general principles course, then you graduate into the organ system. So you'll start with the cardiovascular system, and then you'll also have units on the urinary system, the pulmonary system, endocrine and reproductive systems. Those are my courses, so on and so forth. So heme immune, gastrointestinal, musculoskeletal, so on and so forth. At the end of your systems courses, you take a preclinical exam, which is just a hurdle exam to get you from out of those systems and into the transition phase of the course. So it includes content from all the 8 organ systems. Whilst you are going through general principles and the organ system courses, you also develop and submit and even begin working on a research proposal, so that by the end of your degree, you'll actually have a published research paper as well. So you can see all the organ system courses here. They're different lengths. So for example, the cardiovascular system is a 12-week course, whereas the endocrine and reproductive systems are 8-week courses. So there's different lengths of courses depending on the content that you need to cover for your licensure exams. And there's a journal club that helps to support you in your research project. So that is the preclinical phase in the standard pathway. And the transition phase after the preclinical phase basically takes you in between the preclinical knowledge and the practical skills that you're going to need to apply during the clinical phase. So the transition phase includes, you can see on the website, the clinical transition units. So you're like, well, I don't really, that doesn't give me any information about that. So the clinical transition units are things like behavioral medicine, nutrition, psychology, things that will help you to apply some of the basic sciences that you've learned in the preclinical phase and transition them into the clinical phase. And then we have our clinical skills course, which is a hybrid virtual and live clinical skills course. So you learn things like the head to toe exam, how to take a complete history, how to do suturing, and so on and so forth. So the transition phase really prepares you to start to apply all the knowledge that you gained in your preclinical phase and be able to apply that practically in your clinical phase. Okay, so then the clinical phase is kind of what all students tend to look most forward to. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you'll be out on your clinical placement. So most students start with their core community family medicine rotation, which is an 8-week rotation. And then the way that core rotations are listed here, you don't have to take them in that order. It completely depends on your interests and where you happen to be placed. So we do recommend that all students go through their core rotations first before they do their elective rotations, which are based on student choice and interest. So the core rotations generally take about 56 weeks, and then you have 16 weeks of elective rotations. What's amazing about OUM is that some of your elective rotations you'll complete in your country of residence, and 4 weeks of your elective rotations you get to go to Samoa and complete an elective rotation at Tupua Tumasese Hospital, Tupua Tumasese Maole Hospital in Apia, Samoa, which you'll have an amazing clinical experience. You will be able to observe and demonstrate clinical skills that you wouldn't have a chance to wherever you happen to complete the rest of your rotations, be that in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, or Canada. So after your core rotations, on the standard pathway, you complete the final clinical exam, and your elective rotations after you complete all your practical in-person assessments, you take what we lovingly call the OSCE, which is the Objective Structured Clinical Examination. So both the FCE, the final clinical exam, and the Objective Structured Clinical Examination are preparatory for licensure exams. So that would be the USMLE Step 2 in the United States, the NAC in Canada, AMC 1 and 2 in Australia, and NZ-REX in New Zealand. And at this point, you will finish your research project as well. So a couple other things about the preclinical phase. You can see the sets of courses that are there, but it doesn't necessarily tell you, well, what am I actually going to be doing on a day-to-day basis? Am I just going to be sitting at my computer, staring at a screen and learning about the cardiovascular system? What am I actually going to be doing? So in each of the organ systems and in the general principles course as well, it's again a hybrid model. So you have a set of pre-recorded mini lectures with slide decks available that will come available to you on the Friday before the week of class, that you'll get to watch and digest at your leisure and at times that are convenient to you. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there are live classes. So the first class of the week is a workshop. The second class of the week is a case discussion. And the third class of the week is either a review session or a problem-based learning session. So you have an opportunity to have some content that's available on demand to you, where you can review, you can digest, you can fast forward, you can rewind. There are there are interactive activities in each of those pre-recorded lectures as well. And then when you come into the live sessions, you'll get to interact with the students and the faculty in that classroom in a number of different ways, and including in breakout rooms and live sessions and case discussions. Some of you may have done problem-based learning in the past and find that that works really well for you, where you get to dig into the information and use your critical thinking skills. So within each of the preclinical courses, you have opportunities to work and study on times that are convenient to you, and also have a chance to connect live with faculty as well as students. So it's exciting we just welcomed last week, we just welcomed in our July cohort of 51 students, and they've just started their general principles course this week. So all this is quite fresh to them, and hopefully we'll be welcoming many of you in our January cohort, and I'll be perhaps talking about you as the new cohort in our next admissions session. So that's the standard pathway, preclinical, transition, and clinical phases. So that's for students who are in Australia, New Zealand, Samoa. And there's only really one big difference between the standard pathway and the USMLE pathway, and that's the USMLE Step 1 and Step 2. So for students who live in the US and plan to rotate and practice in the US, or for students who don't live in the United States but wish to do rotations in the US, or wish to in the future practice in the US, this is the pathway for you. So the preclinical phase is exactly the same. You have the same opportunity to have those pre-recorded interactive lectures, the same opportunity to attend the live classes. I should say there are the classes, the workshop and the case discussion and the problem-based learning and the review session are offered at 2 different times on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So depending on the time zone that you happen to reside in, you can choose a time that works for you. So the courses are all the same on both the standard and the USMLE pathway. The only difference really is the transition phase. So you saw in the standard pathway, they have the clinical transition units, so things like nutrition and behavioral medicine, and the clinical skills course, learning how to do a complete history and the head to toe exam, etc. So the only difference here is the USMLE Step 1 prep course, the NBME examination, and the USMLE Step 1 in the transition phase. So USMLE, again, is the United States Medical Licensure Exam. So Step 1 is taken before commencement of clinical rotations in the US. So there's a preparation course that students can complete at their end of that students do complete at the end of the preclinical phase, which includes an NBME, which is the National Board of Medical Examiners, examination, which is a preparatory exam for the USMLE Step 1. So the USMLE prep course right now is a 6-month course. Students complete it have completed in a minimum of 120 days, a maximum of 218 days. It really depends on the individual, how quickly they'd like to go through and how quickly they can pass the NBME exam, and then they take their USMLE Step 1. We right now have 100% completion rate, pass rate for students who have completed our prep course and have taken the USMLE Step 1. Then those students move on to the clinical skills course the same way that students do in the standard pathway. The clinical phase is also the same as the standard pathway. The only difference is the USMLE Step 2 prep course and the USMLE Step 2. So the USMLE Step 2 prep course can be taken after the completion of core clinical rotations and is a shorter course. Generally takes about 3 months to complete the Step 2 prep course. And then students take the practice exam, the NBME examinations, and then students complete their Step 2 as well. And we also have 100% pass rate on USMLE Step 2 for our students who have completed the Step 2 prep course. So because of those 2 additional preparatory periods and exams, the USMLE pathway takes 4.5 to 5 years to complete versus the 4 to 4.5 years that the standard pathway takes. So just be aware of those additional steps if you live in the United States, if you plan to rotate in the United States or plan to practice in the US in the future. We actually think this is a really great opportunity for students who may reside in Australia or New Zealand or Samoa to also, while you're in the thick of things, you can go ahead and take the Step 1, Step 2 exam. So if you wish in the future to be able to practice internationally, you'd have the opportunity to do so. So that's the USMLE and the standard pathways. I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea and some inside information that's not present for everyone on the website. And if you have additional questions about that, I see there are a few in the chat window that I'm going to answer right now. If there's some details that you want to dive into, have a further conversation about it, we're more than happy to connect with you on that. Your admissions counselor can connect you directly to the preclinical director. And they'll set up a time to speak with you directly. So hi to John in Indiana, and Anon has a question, just wondering for the panel interview with the faculty and staff, what do we need to prep for that? Would there be clinical questions for us to know? So I'm going to pass that back over to our admissions team, and then we'll get to some of the other questions in the Q&A box.
Yep. So again, two interviews you're going to go through while you're going through the process. The initial screening interview will be with a member of the admissions team, possibly two members of the admissions team. That particular interview, you're going to talk probably a lot about your just readiness to be a student here. Maybe not so much dive into the academic part of it. I may be on one of those sessions. Shanda may be on your session. We'll talk about your your work study life, your other commitments, what in your day, how are you going to manage all of that into becoming a successful student. So we'll talk a lot about that. We'll talk about your clinical rotations, your flexibility to move and go as you need to, and just basically making sure that as an applicant, based on our evaluation, being a student here fits into your life. For the panel interview, I think it gets a little bit different. Actually, Dr. McGuire is on on the North American panel team, so maybe she can talk a little bit more about those specific questions. But you'll probably get into more about academics. You are, speaking with faculty members who are very knowledgeable about the program. They know what the successful students do and what they kind of appear like during the admissions process. So the panel interview, does get a little bit more about kind of the academic side, I think, of being a successful student.
Thanks, Angelo. Shanda, do you want to add anything to that before I add a little bit about what, from a faculty member or interview panelist member perspective, they might need to do?
No, Angelo's got it again. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what I would say is be yourself. That's who we want to get to know. We want to know that you're the right fit for the community here at OUM, that the structure of the program is the right fit for you, that you have the motivation, that you have the level of compassion and empathy and knowledge and skill, or ability to gain knowledge and skill that it would take to become a future clinician. So I would say just know yourself and know your goals. We really just want to get to know you better and see if it would be the right fit for you. So another question from the Q&A, actually a couple of questions they've said, are the references professional references, e.g. work colleague manager, or can it also be a personal reference, e.g. a close friend or family member?
Please do your best to get professional references. I can't stress that enough. We have a point system. We evaluate these letters. Don't treat it as just a checkoff item to send these in. As I mentioned, one of them has to be a physician. Hopefully you have some either professional or volunteer experience with a physician. But for the other two, it's up to you who you want those other two references to be, but certainly getting them from supervisors, even colleagues that know you well enough, that can say really pinpoint why they think you're going to be a great doctor someday. Those things matter. So definitely a professional reference. I know for a lot of you, you've probably been separated from your college years, maybe, so getting a faculty letter may not be possible. So certainly get those from people that that you work with, but also, again, people that can really know you well enough to explain why they think you're going to be a successful student and why you should join the profession.
Thanks, Angelo. The second part of the question I can take, which is, what is the teaching calendar? Are there any lecture or teaching breaks throughout the year, or is learning spread out at one's own pace throughout the year? So there is a set teaching calendar for the year. So you'll start with a week of what we call O week, orientation week, and then you'll go directly into the general principles course. After general principles, there's 1 week off before you start your systems. And then thereafter, there's a 2-week break between each system. So at the end of cardiovascular, for example, you'll have 2 weeks before you start, for example, urinary system. We also have a university closure over the December holidays. So there's, I think, 2 or 3 weeks there for students who started in January or July of this year. They actually have all of December off. And then within a course itself, there is a initial MCQ exam, then a midterm, and in the middle of the course, there's a reading week for that midterm. So it's not exactly time off, but it's time off from instruction and study time. And then at the end of the course, the last week of classes is also a reading week for final exams as well. So we do try to schedule in breaks so that students have time to rest, recuperate, refresh their brains before they move on to the next unit. So there are many other questions in the Q&A box that we're going to get to. I'm going to move on to our next section now, and we'll continue to answer these questions as we go along. So I want you to have a chance, those of you who are attending live or whether you're joining us via recording as well, to meet some of our OUM student ambassadors today. So we have here with us Fiba Muthril, Norman Chu, and Nabil Hashemi, who are a few of our student ambassadors. So Norman let you know he's a preclinical student from Queensland. Fiba let us know she's a preclinical student from New South Wales, and Nabil is also a clinical student from New South Wales. If you'd like to get in touch with our other student ambassadors, because you happen to live, for example, in Western Australia or in North America, we also have our student ambassadors' names and their contact information here if you'd like to connect with them. Or you can get in touch with your admissions counselor if you want to pose a question to our ambassadors through there. Because we have a few of our student ambassadors here in person with us, I thought I'd take that opportunity to ask them a couple of questions for your benefit. And if you have any questions for our student ambassadors, please go ahead and type those in the Q&A box. So I'm going to start with you, Fiba. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be an OUM student and why you decided to start your medical student journey at OUM?
Hi, everyone. Well, firstly, I chose to be a student ambassador because I remember when I was weighing in the options to go back to studying and starting medical school, I went down the traditional pathway, and it was quite challenging in terms of organizing logistics. And I've got a family, I've got 2 kids, so their schedule, my study, my work, it didn't work out. And I happened to meet somebody who was considering OUM at the time at a university in Sydney. And he recommended OUM. So I finished my 1 term, and I was kind of like, not sure, to be honest, because, I've not heard of this model. So having that person to recommend and, guide me through really helped. And so I thought if that helped me to make that decision that I was not sure about, then why not me give that back to someone else? So therefore, I chose to be a student ambassador. And last year, being a student ambassador, I've had people reach out to me, and it's been a very good experience. So I want to continue doing that. So therefore, I am the student ambassador. And the second part of your question, sorry, can you please repeat that, Dr. Ram?
Can you tell us a little bit about your medical student journey and why you chose OUM?
So thank you. It's Friday, running around between work, I'm trying to juggle. It has been quite challenging in my first year, especially preclinical. My background is in technology and I've got a well-established career in technology. But there is that desire of wanting to do med school, which I, wanted to do after high school, but I didn't end up pursuing it. And being in technology now that I've got a lot of background and experience that I would like to use towards the medical field in the future. So there is that, bringing in medicine and technology, a goal, a long-term purpose. So starting preclinical was very challenging because purely computer science and mathematics background. With that background, I felt like I was a baby. Like I had to learn how to walk and crawl. Like, I didn't have any foundation about biochemistry or all of that preclinical subjects. The last I've learned all of that was in high school. That was 20 years ago. And so for me, it was very challenging to wrap my head around all the pathways and things like that. But I really enjoyed that challenge and I welcome that challenge. A challenge excites me. And so, trying to work out the schedule between my family, my studies, and I work full time. Studying early in the morning, wake up early in the morning at 5 a.m., study, work out, go to work, come back in the evening, get kids to bed, again, back to studying. It's like I slept with my books and my iPad at my device 24/7. But it was very fun, I would say, challenging, but fun. And now I'm in my last organ-based organ system course, Hemic Immune. And I'm going to miss it actually. So the 2 weeks breaks that I get between my organ systems, like I miss studying because it's become so much part of me and my lifestyle that I couldn't wait to get back to my next organ system. So clinical rotations is going to be interesting for me because it's, a lot of that portion is going to be self-directed. And it'll be a slightly different way of learning than organ system. So, but I welcome that challenge and I love it. So if you are truly passionate about this and you get excited when there is challenges presented your way, then do not hesitate. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiba. It's funny, I was just talking to another student yesterday about taking breaks, and they're like, but I love studying. I don't want to stop studying during the break. So that's great, and appreciate that. And Norman, could you tell us a little bit about your medical student journey and why you chose OUM?
Yes, certainly. For myself, again, like Fiba, I also tried the traditional route. So my background is I did a Master of Science back in Auckland in New Zealand, and I was at a point where I was offered to do my PhD because I was at the end of my master's, and my supervisor was like, "Look, do you want to do a PhD? There's money available. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just need to do your PhD and we'll have everything else sorted." I was like, "It's a great deal. They can even pay for my student loans. That's great." But I was really at a crossroads because I saw how being in the lab was like. And look, for me, I understood that I myself, I love learning new things. I love being in the sciences, but the thing that was missing for me was more that interpersonal relationships that you get in medicine. So that's why I knew for a fact that I wanted to stay in science, but I wanted to deal with people. I love dealing with people. And that's when I really started considering med school, because med school was always in the back of my mind. So I started a traditional GAMSAT route, and I did pretty close. My GPA was at 7, so I thought I had no dramas. But anyone who's set the GAMSAT knows that it's a bit of a grind. I believe I would have gotten there eventually, but personal circumstance means that come 30 years old, I had to make a decision. And lucky for me, I actually had a couple of friends from uni that I've come across OUM with. So back in 2014, I think, one of my friends updated their Facebook profile saying they've started university at OUM. So I was like, just had to look. And for some reason, I've remembered that university until 2019, and that's when I started my journey in 2019. At the time, I submitted my application, but just because I really wanted to get started. And the admissions team at the time, very helpful, and asked me a bunch of questions in terms of whether I was ready to commit to OUM, opened my eyes into how much I really need to think about before doing it. So I took 2 years to plan my life, talked to my partner about it, and it is a joint decision because while you yourself are doing med school, you have to be aware that you are going to be affecting the lives of your partner or your family because you're going to rely on them a lot for support. So I took 2 years to really decide. And again, I spoke to my friend who was an OUM graduate, and I came across another church member who was an OUM graduate as well, who started working in Queensland. So I think planning my life and speaking to those graduates really solidified my commitment to OUM and my belief into OUM as well. So then I went ahead and applied and got in, and the rest is history. Now, being a student ambassador, again, I think it goes back to the fact that I really love dealing with people, and the admissions team, don't get me wrong, they are wonderful people. They will help you any way you can, but I think there is value in what a current student can provide in terms of insights. So that's why I myself wanted to give back and provide that insight whenever I can, because I spoke to a lot of graduates, but I haven't spoken to a student. So that's why I'm here. If you ever need to reach out, do reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Norman. We're glad you're here and doubly glad that you're one of our student ambassadors. So thanks for that. Nabil, would you like to introduce yourself? And then can you tell us a little bit about your medical student journey and why you chose OUM?
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. Hi, everyone. My name is Nabil. I'm one of the clinical students based in New South Wales. And my background, I was working a number of years in respiratory and sleep medicine. And I always had medicine in the back of my mind. It was something I was thinking about. And over the years, as I was working, I noticed just generally that this sort of want and desire to study medicine just sort of was growing more and more over time. So it was interesting. I remember we'd be seeing patients and we'd always be thinking about what's happening with their respiratory system, what's happening with their sleep. But naturally, I was interested to sort of understand more about what's happening with the person. So understanding more about their background, maybe what other conditions they might have, what other treatments they were having. And I think I just really wanted to understand and learn more and be able to have more knowledge and skills to be able to help. And so I knew a few friends at the time that had already graduated from OUM or were studying at OUM, and I had the opportunity to have a lot of discussions with them about their experience with OUM and just generally how positively they recommended to study with OUM. And so I did a lot of research myself, and after applying and being accepted, I've just been really grateful for the whole process and journey that I've had until now, to have this opportunity to study medicine. And I think similar to what both Phoebe and Norman have shared is that I think we've really benefited from the opportunity to be able to speak to students that are further ahead than us, and to be able to have this opportunity now to be able to share our experience and to be able to help wherever we can as well. So I'm also grateful for the opportunity. If anyone wants to ask any questions or wants to explore further, I'm more than happy to be reached out to. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabil. I always ask our student ambassadors to provide a little bit of advice. So I'm maybe going to ask you first, Nabil. What advice would you give to individuals who are considering applying to medical school, such as the attendees here today?
I think very similarly to what Norman actually shared, I was thinking about I think really when you're thinking about applying and studying medicine, that it is of course a big commitment. So it is important to really give it thought and to also be thinking about your systems of support around you. For example, like say your family or friends. I remember before I applied, I actually sat and sort of consulted with my family, like really in detail about, what it would mean to apply and to be studying medicine. And so I think that those are important to think about. But then also if you have that interest in medicine, that I think you should definitely apply and just really give it your best shot. And I think in terms of like the process of going through and studying, that I think what's really helpful is to be able to establish a weekly schedule. Like, so to know in the week, for example, if it's Wednesday, I know by Wednesday, this is what I need to have done, or this is what I need to have finished. Also to be thinking ahead about what you're going to be studying or what's to come, to be able to read ahead as well. I remember maybe about a month before I started, I think I just started reading straight away, like what we were going to be starting with in our first number of weeks. And I think also was in contact with some of the faculty to ask questions and to explore some of the concepts, to be able to just be able to, as the phrase goes, hit the ground running. So yeah, I think all of those were really helpful for me. I'd highly suggest. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabil. Fiba, do you have any advice for our attendees who are considering applying to medical school?
I 100% agree with what Nabil has said about, being able to look ahead and plan ahead and have a schedule, know what you're going to be doing. And to add on to that, if you are, a parent or someone who's got people dependent on you, then you need to also be ahead of what they will be also having in those times. So it's like a proper, full-on project management of your family. And I've found that I've grown as a human being better since starting OUM. And there was these qualities that I guess people made note of in my reference letter about me had really come about when I was studying. For example, I noticed that this is a journey that I'm putting my children through as well while I'm studying. So there is a lot of demand on them to be able to look after themselves when I'm, frantically preparing for a quiz, and my kids are 12 and 9. So I've learned that I need to, be kinder to myself and to them, and just to get them through the journey and say what, mom's got a quiz this weekend as usual. And, at the end of 6 weeks, I'd have 2 weeks break. So we'd go out, do something every weekend, and every night I make it a point that I have dinner with them. So, I didn't really think of a lot of these things before starting OUM. I kind of took it for granted. But being in OUM and working full time, I'm really grateful for that flexibility that I've got, that I can work full time and provide for my family and pay my fees. I've also realized that what that means is a lot more coordination and discipline on all of our parts, and applying that empathy towards my kids and myself, kindness towards them. And I think this growth that I'm experiencing is going to help me in future as a doctor when I practice it, understanding patients who are patients' family, what the situation they might be. So I'm really grateful for the experience, and I've learned quite a bit from that perspective. So my advice is being kind to yourself and to your own family. Understand that they are going through the journey with you, and see how you can alleviate the pressure for everyone in the little ways you can. My kids know how to make their own meals now. They've got checklists in their rooms to what they need to do every morning. So I don't have to be the snooze button reminding. And that journey, so they've also gone through that growth, and they've also developed for their age. I think that they're doing pretty good. because of what I'm kind of putting them through. So if I didn't approach it in a kinder way, then I think it would have been a pretty mess for all of us. At the end of the day, like, their mental health is important to me. All of our mental health is important to us. And trust me, when you do learn some of those psychiatric illnesses, you associate yourself with that, with the stress that you have with certain weeks' content. So just be kind to yourself and plan, leave some contingency buffer for if things doesn't go as per your plan, for plan B as you study, and good luck.
Thanks, Fiba. Norman, do you have anything to add, any advice you'd like to provide to our attendees about applying to medical school?
Well, I think Nabil and Fiba has covered all of it, but I will say that, look, the way I did it, my partner's always joining it back, saying, what does your next 5 years look like? So when you're planning to apply for OUM, really think about what your next 5 years is going to look like. And if they've stressed it, and I will stress it as well, it's mid-school, whether it's OUM or anywhere else, it's a family affair, all right? So while you're studying, you have to realize that your life impact the rest of the people around you as well. And you're going to need that support. So plan ahead with your significant other, what your next 5 years is going to look like. And like with a general ballpark, you will be studying between the 50 to 60 hour per week mark. So if you need sort of to plan for that to happen, and plan your life around it and see, is that something that you envision yourself and your family doing? It is a huge commitment, but also for those who are sort of on the fence thinking about it, well, my sister gave me this advice, or this pearl, I suppose. She was like, look, Norman, you're worried about your age and all that, and whether you should start mid-school at such an old age, or, you know, whatever. She's like, you're going to turn 36 anyway, because that's my projected graduation date. So you either graduate with a medical degree, or you turn 36 anyway, and still thinking about whether you have a medical degree. So so that's when I was like, yeah, okay, look, you're very wise, I'll go ahead with it. So if you're thinking about it, worried about your age, don't worry about it, just do it.
Thanks, Norman. We're glad you took your sister's advice. So Fiba and Norman and Nabil all talked about the importance of engaging with family and community, significant others, kids, goldfish, dogs. And if you've come to any of our webinars in the past, you'll have heard me talk about the importance of support systems. And I have to say that the thing that we see that creates the most level of success in our students is that they have a strong support system. So think about your support system and who is going to be there to support you through those long days and nights in medical school, and make sure that you're engaging them through the process as you begin your journey as a medical student. And I would also say, consider that our OUM student ambassadors to be part of that support system. OUM has actually a number of programs for student support that you can learn about on our website. If you went to our last set of webinars, you might have had a chance to meet some of our peer supporters or hear about our academic advising program or our clinical mentors. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can see some initial information on our website, or you can contact myself or your admissions counselors directly. So I know that you'll all join me in thanking Fiba and Norman and Nabil for their sage advice. If you have additional questions for them, please go ahead and type it in the chat window. We're at our Q&A period now, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions that I deferred a bit that had been in our chat window, and we'll get to those now. But if you have questions that you haven't yet asked, now's the time to type them into our Q&A box. So Annalisa wants to know, can we claim CME or CE? Angela or Shanda, do you have the answer to that question, or do I need to ask Annalisa about her acronyms?
I think Annalisa, and correct feel to put your question back in if I'm wrong. If you're asking for any type of like advanced standing or credit for starting medical school, unfortunately we can't do that. So really, while we appreciate everyone's background and professional background through the admissions process, and we get a lot of people who do have quite a bit of clinical experience. Once you start medical school, everyone starts from day one, brand new medical student. I hope that was what you were asking, Annalisa, but let me know if I got that wrong.
Yes, it does say, she's clarified and said it was continuing education.
Yeah, again, again, that'll help you, that experience in the admissions, but once you start the program, we can't really give you advanced standing for your previous educational or professional background.
Thank you. Elu wants to know, can we also get a copy of the presentation slides? So how would they get a copy of these slides, Angelo or Shanda?
Sorry, contact admissions. We'll be happy to provide that for you. admissions@oum.edu.ws.
Thanks, Angelo. Anon would like to know, will clinical rotations be based on where students are currently located? For example, if I'm in Sydney, will I get placements in Sydney? So this is a good question. So if you're in Australia, like Anon, there are two different ways that you go about your clinical rotation. So in Australia, we have clinical coordinators in each state who are responsible for scheduling your clinical rotations. So if you live in New South Wales, you have a clinical coordinator for New South Wales that will coordinate and schedule your community family medicine placement, your emergency medicine placement, your surgery, your obs and gynae, so on and so forth. So you're not guaranteed to get all of those in Sydney. And in fact, you actually have an opportunity to go beyond Sydney and go outside New South Wales if you want to do some of your rotations in Western Australia or in Queensland. You also have an opportunity to do that as well. So the more opportunities you can seek, the more opportunity you'll have to rotate in other areas. So you will have, for those of you who are in Sydney or in other states in Australia, you have a clinical rotation coordinator in your state that will coordinate those for you. You're not guaranteed to get them in the exact city in which you live. For those who live in Samoa, all of your rotations will be at TTM Hospital, and those are all coordinated for you by our home office in Samoa. For students in New Zealand, our clinical rotations in New Zealand were disrupted by regulations during COVID-19, so we're reestablishing those now. And the setup for New Zealand students currently is they're able to come to Australia and complete their clinical rotations there, but we'll continue to give you updates as those clinical rotation sites are reestablished in New Zealand. For students in the United States and Canada, we have a dedicated clinical rotation site near Chicago, and students also are able to work with the Dean's Office in North America if they have a particular hospital that they'd like to complete their rotations in. So a lot of individuals in North America come from healthcare backgrounds, not exclusively, but many do and wish to complete their rotations at the hospital or hospitals in which they've worked, and the North American Dean's Office can work with your hospitals of choice to develop a clinical placement agreement. So there's not a guarantee that those will be in place, but we do have staff and faculty available to support additional agreements. And that's true in our other locations as well, other regions as well. So Anon also wants to know, what days would live classes be for those in New Zealand or Samoa? So for those in Australia, New Zealand, or Samoa, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So that's one option. That might be a bit late for those in New Zealand or Samoa, depending on when you like to study and learn and what your work schedule happens to be. There's also classes that run at 8 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in North America, which is 10 a.m. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in Australian Eastern Standard Time. So you're not bound. So like a particular location, if you're in New Zealand, you don't have to go to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. You can make a choice to go to the other class depending on your personal preference and schedule. Non wants to know, do we have to organize our own placements, or does OUM do that for us? So I've answered that. I have the choice of both. There are clinical coordinators that will schedule rotations, and if you also have a particular hospital or clinical placement that you'd like us to create an agreement with, as long as we have sufficient notice and the clinical site is amenable to that placement, we'll work with that site for your rotation there. Either I or admissions can answer this. Anon wants to know, is the price the same for both pathways? Would you guys like me to take it? Angela, you want to take it?
Say yes. Now keep in mind, US students pay in their local currency, Australians pay in their local currency, and same with Canadians and students from New Zealand, but same tuition price for all students.
Okay. Thanks, Angelo. Paul would like to know, do Australian graduates of our program have to sit the AMC for registration? Is there the ability to have previous qualifications reviewed as part of a recognition of prior learning to reduce the study time? Angela or Shanda, would you like to answer the first part of that question? Or I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think we answered the prior learning experience part, that you can't get advanced credit. I don't think I'm in really position to talk about the AMC, but I don't know if you or Shanda can take that one possibly.
So OUM graduates, so OUM is a Samoan medical school, so it's considered an international medical school for Australia. So that means our graduates need to sit the AMC 1 and 2. Shanda, do you have anything you want to add to either of those pieces?
No, but I'll also answer in the chat as well. So.
Oh, please go ahead. Okay, thanks. Amanda says, good evening. Where are the clinical rotations for US practicing students? So I've answered that question, but I'll just reiterate that there is a site, a dedicated site in Chicago. And then we also, our dean's office will also work with other sites on request. Okay, a couple of questions about GPA, and Angela, you were talking a little bit about the GPA requirements in the admissions process. So this is a pretty specific question, but I think it's worth asking and answering. So is the GPA requirement flexible? Would you be considered if you have a GPA of 2.9 instead of 3, but you've been working in the health industry for 10 years, for example? So maybe I'll have both Angelo and Shanda answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, GPA, we say 3, and we hope most students are at that. Anything below that, you know, I mean, 2.97 sounds pretty close. So I think you're good, you know, with that GPA. But I think, you know, if we're starting to get to the 2.9s and 2.8-ish, you really, you know, there's still a chance to get in. What needs to happen is the other parts of your application really need to be strong, you know, as far as your recommendation letters, your essay, just your overall commitment to be a doctor. Hopefully that comes through in the application, ultimately the interview process. So again, I hope everyone's at that 3.0 or higher, but if you're close to that, there's still, you know, opportunity for you to be a student here. Actually, I think Shanda can talk a little bit also about how that translates to the Australian GPA as well.
Yeah, so if you have a GPA of 5.5, that's wonderful on the 7-point scale, or, you know, again, a little bit lower, we will look at as well. And like I tell all the students on the phone, we look at applications holistically. So as Angelo has said, we will score you based on a lot of different things. So there may still be a chance that you'll be accepted. So you should contact your admissions counselor and get your GPA assessed.
Thanks, Shanda. Shanda, Elva asks, can I see the recording of the session when the seminar is finished?
Yes, we'll put it up on the website as soon as it's available. And I think we will email everyone as well. I'm not sure, Angelo, do you know if we email people?
The recording, probably not, but we usually get these up on the website pretty quickly. If you go to our website, our webinars page is a great place to go to. There's a quick promo for that. You have access to sign up for on-demand recordings from a lot of our previous sessions with students and graduates. So make sure to do that. And this session will be on there too. And check out our YouTube page. You'll find a lot of those videos on our YouTube page as well.
Thanks. Shanda, I think this is an Australian applicant, so I'm going to ask you. They have a couple of questions. One, are there second round interview offers given at OUM, like the standard GAMSAT pathway have 2 rounds of interview offers? And is there a section where I can add my volunteer experience to my application?
Okay, so we do the standard 2 interviews. So you will go through an interview with your admissions counsellor, and then from there you will go on to an interview with the panel. We don't go back and re-interview or contact people who didn't make it to the interview the first time, unfortunately. And also with your volunteer experience, you can just add that to your CV, and we include that in the assessment of your application. Angelo, anything to add?
Perfect. Yeah, add it to the CV. Anything that can help you prove, that you're committed to medicine. If it's not in your professional background, certainly add volunteer experience, shadowing opportunities. Add all of that information to your CV or resume.
Thanks, Angelo and Shanda. Linda wants to know, how does getting matched for fellowship work as a student from the US?
So would you like me to take that one, or?
Why don't you start and then I'll add in.
Yeah, we can both. So in the US, what happens, actually, you go through the match process to get into a US residency. You would have passed USMLE Step 1 and 2 to qualify for that, in addition to your medical degree from OUM. I certainly encourage you to maybe read more about it on the Match website. They have such really great information on their website to talk about the process. You do apply, obviously, as an international medical graduate. One of the nice things about the US Match process is that any residency position that's available through the Match program is available to both US graduates and international graduates. So that's one of the nice parts about it. But you must complete a residency program before you apply for your full license as a medical doctor in the US.
Thanks, Angelo. Did I miss it? Did you say anything about ECFMG?
I did not yet.
Well, I could say it. And then Shanda, I'll maybe, even though Linda didn't ask this, but I think then our Australian applicants might be interested about how they would go through for their internship. So I'll maybe pass it to you after. So, so because you be a international medical graduate, we call it IMG, you would need certification from ECFMG, the Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. So once you complete your degree, you apply into ECFMG for certification of your degree, send in things like your diploma and some other paperwork. They certify you, and then you apply into the match. So that's what it's like for in the US. And I'll maybe just say a little bit about Canada as well. So Canada has a system for match called CARMS, the Canadian Residency Matching Service. And each province in Canada has separate requirements for what they need and what they require for the match, but you have to complete the MCCQE1 as well as the NAC before, for most provinces, before you apply into CARMS. And they will also accept ECFMG certification of your documentation as you apply into CARMS. In addition to that, within CARMS, there are selected spots for international medical graduates, particularly if you are interested in rural or remote practice. So I encourage you to have a closer look at the CARMS website for the individual provincial requirements, as well as the information for IMGs. And there's 2 sets of matches in CARMS, and OUM graduates are eligible for both sets of matches in CARMS. Shanda, do you want to talk a little bit about the process in Australia?
Sure, I am a little rusty on this, so
Don't fill anything in.
As an international medical graduate, you do need to pass the AMC 1 and 2 exams. So there are different pathways available. You can go pass the AMC 1 and then go and do an internship or whatever else is available. And then you need to pass the AMC2 exam, and then you can go into a work-based placement. Or if you want, you can do AMC1 and then do 2 straight away afterwards, and then do your internship after that, and then you can apply for whatever's next. I think the licensure, APRA, something like that. So
That's great. Thanks, Shanda. And there's a question, how likely is it that an international graduate from OUM will work in Australia? So how likely is it that anyone who completes medical school will work in any of the jurisdictions that OUM serves? So it's very likely that if you are a graduate of OUM, you will be able to secure a position of choice. It depends on you and where you are willing to go and accept positions. So the more flexible that you can be, the greater chance there is that you'll be able to match in your area of interest. I will say that OUM has graduates working across all of the states in Australia. We have graduates in New Zealand and Samoa, in the US and in Canada as well. And we actually just brought on 11 of our practicing graduates to act as academic advisors for students, to help them through their program, to support them as they go through things like preparing for the AMC 1 and 2 and so on. Anonymous wants to know, we've answered that question a little bit about the process of attaining internships after completion, as well as sitting the AMC exam. So I think Shanda's already answered that question. Kesha wants to know, can we get a copy of an academic calendar, when classes start and where breaks are scheduled? So Angela or Shanda, do you know if we have that information on the website, or how they might get more information about the OUM academic calendar?
I don't think we have that on the website, Tisha, but if you would like to contact, I don't know if you're in the US or not, but just contact admissions. We can provide you more detailed information. I don't believe the academic calendar is on our website.
Thanks. As a US citizen and California resident, Norman, you'd like to add something, please go ahead.
Yes, hi, Dr. McGuire. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the pathway to registration in Australia. So with regards to registration, we do need to do both the AMC 1 and AMC 2. So you can choose to do AMC 1, which is the multi-choice question board exam, and the AMC 2 is a sort of clinical examination. So you can choose to do both at the same, finish both and then get a job in Australia. So you are able to apply for a job in Australia after AMC 1 and 2, and you get something called a provisional registration. So all that means is you have to then complete your 1 year of work in Australia, and then you'll get your general registration. The other pathway for you to get registration is to finish your AMC 1 and then apply for an internship in Australia. Now, this is the more difficult part to attain in terms of internship. There are definitely students of ours that are doing internships in Australia, so it is possible, but that is the more difficult option. And then to get onto something called a workplace-based assessment in lieu of your AMC2, which is the clinical one. So there are specific hospitals that will take you on a workplace-based assessment basis, but you have to find it out. So I just wanted to add that on, but I also want to say that we do have a graduate who's actually doing pretty good work in terms of providing this type of information. And if any prospective student wants to look it up, it's called Code U Australia. So they deal with a lot of what IMGs can do postgraduate in terms of getting registration and working in Australia. So do look them up as a resource as well. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Norman. While I have you, and maybe Nabil as well, Nana wants to know, can a complex support system be a hindrance in getting a place into the program? I'm not quite sure how to interpret that. I think maybe Nana means like complex families, community situation, or maybe a lack of a support system, do you think that would be a hindrance in getting a place into the program, or how might that be managed?
I'm happy to go first. Well, I think to me, any way you can get any sort of support is good. Like for myself, for example, I have different support for different things, in terms of my study content. If it gets too hard, I have my peer students to go to, so my students are my support for that. But any sort of emotional stuff, I go to my partner, obviously, and family members. So I have a huge string of different support that I can go to, and it's good that if you can build that. And even if it's complex, even if you have only one particular issue who you go to one particular person for, and another to a different person, your support is where you can get it. And definitely do reach out to your peer students as well.
Thanks, Norman. Nabil, do you have anything to advise Nana on about complexity in a support system, how you might navigate that?
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. I think just adding to what Norman shared, I think really it's important to be thinking about, I guess, what different systems you have around you, and even if complex, just thinking about how they're in place to be able to support you with what you're doing in your approach towards medicine. So, and just also echoing that, really also thinking about all of the other students in your cohort as well is actually part of that that system of support for you. So I think something that we always encourage is really to be thinking about like starting study groups with your peers, to be able to go through content together, ask each other questions. And yeah, I think just thinking about how these different systems that you might have around you, how they'll help serve you in approaching medicine. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabil. I'm just monitoring our chat window, making sure that we answer your questions. And we have a question from an attendee who's a California resident. I noticed OUM is not on California's approved medical school list. Is OUM planning on attaining California approval in the near future?
Sure, I can take that one, Dr. McGuire. So California is an interesting state. For many years, they had the so-called famous or infamous California list of approved medical schools. It was a limited list. A lot of international schools were not on that list, meaning they could not practice in California. I believe in January of 2020, California removed that policy. And right now, and basically what they require is ECFMG certification, which Dr. McGuire addressed earlier. So that has changed a lot of things as far as potentially our graduates practice, not just OUM graduates, from a lot of international schools practicing and even doing a residency in California. So please don't take my word for it. It doesn't matter what Angelo says. Do your own research, check out the California State Medical Board, but you'll see information that they no longer use that list as a way to qualify international medical graduates.
Thanks, Angelo. Anon wants to know, are we guaranteed placements with all requirements met? I'm going to kick that over to admissions, and then I might add on to that.
So rotations, we do our best to arrange, students for clinical training. We have, as we talked about, support for you in Australia. We have the Dean's office in the US to do that. We have sites that we are contracted with where we can place you for rotations. We can also place you in locally if things work out. Obviously, not something we can guarantee. I think from an admissions perspective, when I talk to applicants, I tell them, if you have connections, great. I hope we can do that and work together with that local institution, but be mindful that it may not work out. I would hope anyone who enters our program has the mindset that if things don't work out and I have to go somewhere else, if I have to travel, relocate for the clinical years, this is something I can do. You never want to be stuck in a position where you go through halfway the program and realize you can't leave your hometown. to complete your clinical placement. And of course, don't forget about the 4 weeks in Samoa that all students must complete.
Thanks, Angelo. We had an individual remind us that we forgot to answer about New Zealand, about the postgraduate practice in New Zealand. So I'm just going to ask Shanda how they can get some more information about practicing in New Zealand.
Okay, so the system over there is a little more detailed, and I don't know it off by heart. So what you can do is actually contact us, as Angelo keeps saying, at admissions@oum.edu.ws, and I can send you some more slides about that with much more information.
Thanks, Shanda. Linda would like to know, what's the average age of students? So we could give a number, but what I would say is there's a really large range of ages amongst OUM students. So instead of just hearing the average and being like, oh, I'm way below that average, I'm way above that average, I would just invite you to think about the range of students that are at OUM, Linda, or anyone else that's thinking about the answer to this question, that we really provide a pathway for both traditional as well as non-traditional students to have a medical student journey and to realize their dream of practicing medicine. So we don't really see age is an incredible barrier, whether you're a very, you know, at the younger end of our age range or at the farther end of our age range or just in the middle, that we're really here to accommodate the dream and individuals that have a dream and the motivation to become clinicians. It's really not about a particular age. I don't know if Norman or Nabil or Angelo or Shanda want to say anything about that.
You're never too old. And I'll leave it as that. I can't tell you how many times I get calls from people saying, Angela, I want to do this, but I think I'm too old. You know, it's never the case. You know, it's only too old when you decide it's too old. I think that's the best way. And I think Norman may have said it best, that regardless of whether you do this or not, you're going to get older. So, you know, you can be a doctor and be older or still thinking about being a doctor a few years from now.
Maybe we'll have Norman's sister come to our next webinar.
I was going to say, just listen to my sister. You're going to be 36 regardless, all right? Either you have a medical degree or you're thinking about getting a medical degree at 36. So,
Nabil, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I remember when Norman shared that, it really resonated with me as well, that if you're thinking about medicine, you're thinking about the time, you know, and age and all of those sort of things. End of the day, if you apply or if you don't apply, you're still going to be at that age anyway. So I was thinking, I mean, I remember for myself that when I was considering that, you know, I realized, okay, so when I graduate, I'll be in my mid-30s. And same thought process that, you know, whether if I apply or not, I'm still going to be in my mid-30s. So either I'll be a doctor or I'll be thinking about applying. And also, I guess the time from when we start to when we graduate, I think because, you know, if you have that interest, so you'll enjoy as you're going through, and it's busy as well. So the time itself, I think, will go by very quickly as well. So you'll blink and you'll already be halfway, or you'll blink and you'll already be close to graduating.
Thanks, Nabil. I'm going to pass it over to our admissions team to give you some information about next steps.
Okay, so most of you here are applicants, I believe, and if you're not, that's fine too. You know, just keep in mind, if you're applying and deciding that the January start date is where you want to begin your journey with OUM, please keep in mind September 1st is the deadline. You know, get all your documents in, get your application submitted by September 1st to start in January class. If you're accepted, December 1st is when your post-acceptance documents and first tuition payment, which we call intake fee payment, will be due. We do also have an intake in July of 2024. So if January is too early for you, you can also apply for a later intake. And orientation happens about a week or so before classes begin.
Thanks, Angelo. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your day or evening or morning and joining us. We really appreciate having you in an OUM community space, and I really hope to be welcoming many of you at a week in January of next year. So I hope to see you again at our next webinar. If you have any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today, I encourage you to reach out to your admissions counselor, or you can reach out directly to one of our student ambassadors, and we're happy to answer your questions and make your application journey as smooth as possible. So I know you'll join me in thanking all of our panelists today, Angelo, Shanda, and Grace from our admissions department, Nabil, Norman, and Fiba from our student ambassadors for joining us today. So thanks everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.